I think we're live. Happy Friday. Happy Freight Friday. How's Chicago? It's freezing cold in Chicago. To those of you all the way out there, what are you drinking this Friday? Looks like we have a pretty big crowd today. We're going to talk about how to negotiate with your customer. And here's the difference about this episode. I really want everybody to tune in and pay attention to this episode because I've brought to you the experts in negotiating contracts with the customers, but I brought you a shipper, I brought you a very experienced broker, and I brought you a risk guy. And we are not going to be boring you with contract crap. We're going to be telling you the straight, what should I call it? I guess the real things you need to know about negotiating the contracts, about negotiating these deals. And today we're going to start with the shipper broker contract. I say broker. I'm going to do this when I say broker. This is my outline. I'm going to say shipper broker contract. But what we're trying to do is help those who are in truckload, who are getting an award or they're getting a contract from their customer. We're going to try to teach you guys how to negotiate through it. This episode is brought to you by my favorite factoring company, OTR Capital. You will see my OTR friends in the chat. Say hello to them. There's a link in the description. Please click on it and check out. They made me like a little landing page with mad gains on it and OTR, and it looks like I bet you there's a heart on there. The reason why I like OTR more than other factoring companies is because they're authentic, they're real, just like we are on my show. They treat you like a family. They're not fucking around with fees. They're not taking advantage of people, and they take care of their carriers and the brokers. So reach out to that link in the description, and thank you to OTR Capital. All right. Now, I see that Charles Lung is in the house. Peter is here. Amanda Miller, my favorite freight broker from Alabama. I bet she's not freezing her butt off. I see Andrew Teal and Ron Kane, who are my counsel. The freight coach is in the house. Yay! I saw someone else is in the house too, a newbie somewhere in here. So say hello in the comments. We are on YouTube. Let's get the party going. So I'm going to drink, and when I drink, my guests that you are going to freaking love are going to join us on the screen, and then they're going to introduce themselves. And everybody's been on the show except for Guy. So Guy, you're going to start first with introducing yourself, because I've known Guy for many years.
So nice of you. My name is Guy Byars. I am a VP at Jones Logistics in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. I have had the dubious pleasure and honor of working with Jeremy and Cassandra in the past at Echo. Spent some years at Schneider, spent 6 or so years at GM, and spent some time with the Canadian outfit. So I am minimally qualified, but excited to be here.
One of my favorite leaders that I've worked with, not to like encourage you and to make your head even more bigger, but definitely one of my favorite leaders. Jeremy, you're next. Another favorite person that I used to work with.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Jeremy Prince. I, as Cassandra and Guy both said, we worked together when we worked at Echo. I grew up on the freight brokerage side of things, but have recently, in the last 3-4 years, transitioned to working for construction materials distribution companies. So now I'm on the shipper side, and I'm the director of North American logistics for foundation building materials.
I love it. We're very lucky to have you. And then my favorite, who's been on many times and who's also on the Mad Gains Council that I have, is Jason. Jason, welcome to the party. Thank you for coming back.
Hi.
Thank you to your company for having you back.
Thanks. Jason Zalewski, Vice President of Safety Compliance with Ascent Global Logistics. Contracts are my thing, and I'm glad to be a part of the show.
And I think one of the reasons that people love having you on, Jason, is you do have a good breadth of knowledge, but it's also realistic. I think that you understand the balance between business and risk when it comes to some of these negotiations. And I think that's one of my favorite things. Sometimes, like especially a lawyer, we tend to be over on the risk side way too much. Okay, you guys, this is going to be a very good episode, and it's going to be packed full of content. And I think we're going to do a series if I can convince these folks to come back on with me. But we strategized beforehand, and we want to start with the who is allowed to sign a contract. And this is a big umbrella that we're going to talk about, because I remember one company that I consulted for or I worked for, I can't remember, but I was helping them and just everybody and their mama were just signing contracts. Everybody was just, because they were started small and then they kept growing and nobody put policies into place and everybody's trying to close a deal. People are just signing contracts. So I think we should start with that. Jason, can you start with anything that hits your mind, like with regards to risks or what you have best practices when it comes to who's allowed to sign contracts? And it doesn't have to be for your company. Talk in general and all your experience.
Right. So I think that, you know, the best rule of thumb is that if you don't know your company's risk tolerance, you should not be signing an agreement with anybody. And then also, you should be authorized by a CEO or, you know, executive management to sign agreements if that's going to be, you know, on your plate. Having dispatchers and sales reps and everybody sign agreements, things will get lost. Your company won't have the full scope of what they've actually agreed to across the board.
So true.
So very important.
Guy.
Yep.
Sorry, Guy, have you ever signed a contract without legal or reading it or anything?
Not with my current employer, I'm very proud to say. In the past, I might, and again, this it's funny, but this situation has changed and evolved a lot in 16, 17 years, right? There was a Wild West time. Those days might have been at Echo where we worked together. But again, verdicts and the stakes keep going up. It's fascinating to talk about this all the time.
And probably your career keeps advancing too. So there's like more responsibility getting flooded on you. And you're like, oh God, you're feeling the heat. Feeling the heat.
I don't know about advancing, but certainly snowballing. How's that?
What has been, you know, in your entire career, first of all, can we talk about who's allowed to sign what kind of contract? Like, can I sign a rate con? Are you okay with that if I work for you, Guy, in any job you've ever had? Let's talk about broad range. You don't have to talk about your company. Or like, what else do we sign?
Well, there's so many people
besides contracts.
It's really important to define what constitutes a contract. You mentioned rate con, and that's terrific because a rate con is a binding agreement, right?
It is.
We mentioned in our prep NDAs. You know, 10 years ago, an NDA was just everybody signed one just so we could look at data. Now there are hooks and clause and NDAs that bind the organization for a long time. I mean, a lot of things, fuel schedules, of course, rate sheets. And so making sure that everybody understands what they're signing is as critical. I mean, it doesn't have to be a contract to get the organization into quite a pickle.
Yep. I'm glad we talked about that. Jeremy, what do you think? I love some of the points you've said in the past about signing contracts.
You know,
do you sign them? You're a shipper now. Do you just sign these things now?
No, I don't. Even in my role, I'll sign an LOI or an LOA, but anything beyond that, it goes to our legal department and an executive, usually our COO or our CFO will sign them. I don't touch them. There's too much. I'm not a lawyer, right? So, you know, these are legal documents, and I don't want to expose the company in any way to any sort of legal risk if you know I sign something I don't really have authorization to sign. I will also say too, even when I'm engaging with our service providers, our logistics service providers, I won't really accept a contract signature on their side that isn't an officer of the company or a member of their legal team. You know, like if I'm dealing with a transportation company and they have a dispatcher signing the contract, I void it and I tell them they got to go back and have somebody else sign it. Have to have an officer.
Yeah, I think that's important. For those of you out there who are like vetting carriers, I've done this in the past where I've looked to see who's signing on behalf of the carriers. If you're a shipper or your broker and you get that contract, because it's interesting to see who signs it. This is a good question. Stephen West. What's a major difference in a binding document, rate cons sent to carriers from brokers, and a contract? What's the legal differences? Jason?
We had that show, was it a week ago or 2 weeks ago, about rate cons. So everyone knows that there's just there's no set template with a rate con, but generally speaking, rate confirmations are going to isolate the specific movement, that load, disclose accessorials, things like that for that particular shipment, whereas your contract is more vast in laying out liabilities for things like insurance and indemnity and things like that.
Yeah.
Jason, if I sign that rate con, let me just think about this, because there's no reason a broker should be signing rate cons. Like, what else do brokers sign, or shippers, besides like the actual master agreement between a shipper and a broker and a carrier? Is there anything else?
Really, they could execute a rate con, I suppose, if a carrier needed a signature from them as well on it. But generally speaking, a broker's only going to have that contract or like a rate addendum or something like that.
Guy, what do you think?
Well, so there's also a gray area with language added to rate cons, like driver must accept macro point tracking or be penalized a certain dollar amount, or if you try to insert as a broker directions into a contract, or a lot of things, and the rate con can get you in trouble. That do they supersede a contract? These are gray areas that are very important.
Right. I completely agree with that. But at the same time, if I don't accept macro point on the load, what's the real risk there is not getting paid for that load. Whereas if I make a decision on an actual contract with that customer, I could be exposing my company to millions of dollars in lawsuits.
Right.
Or if I tell the driver to take a turn and that driver is over height and hits a bridge, is it my fault as a broker?
Good point. Does
that now break the broker contractor agreement? Am I now directing that carrier as an employee? There's so many questions here.
Right. And you raise a good point. And we talked a lot about that on that rate con episode, where, a rate con can tie back to driver coercion, extending that reach or extending that control over your carrier, which is a big no-no. But yeah, it's certainly a gray area. And there's, like I said, there's no template, no set, guideline confirmation. It's the Wild West.
You guys, one of my friends who works for a big company and he's always reviewing contracts, he wanted me to tell you guys that he saw a couple things that were scary on, what did he say? He said that the contracts he'll get from a carrier will want them to sign a contract, and then the carrier will say that their rate con needs to be used and incorporated into like all their terms on the rate con supersede anything that's in the broker carrier agreement and the master carrier agreement. So there seems to be more tricks going on between these two contracts. But at the end of the day, a rate con is a contract. And so is the master agreement. I think Carrie Polson, one of my favorite people, she made a really good point here. She said rate cons are often incorporated into the broker carrier agreement, right? And it's true, like in the master agreement between a broker and a carrier, or a shipper and a carrier, it'll say, we are also going to have a rate confirmation. And that those terms are incorporated in. So that's really important. But I want you guys all to know that whether you sign the actual formal contract that Jason was talking about or the rate con, they are both legal documents and equally binding. We have a lot of questions coming in. I think we should get to before. Give me 1 second. Vitaly asked a question. I saw Vitaly asked, can Jay-Z save me 25% on my carrier negotiations? Jason, is that your nickname, Jay-Z?
Yeah, well, it used to be. Some people still call me that. But we'll talk about that offline, okay?
I think V's being a smarty pants. But there were some really good, there were some substantive questions coming in. We all know that V is my favorite person. So let's see. I know that there was a really good question from Andrew Teal that I saw. You guys, just so everybody knows, I've been trying to get Andrew Teal to permanently come on the show forever, and he keeps refusing me. Like, I kind of feel like a girl who keeps asking the same guy out on a date, and he keeps saying no, and I'm starting to feel a little desperate. But what happens if someone's not authorized to sign a contract? How beholding is the company to that contract? And I get this question all the fucking time. Does anybody want to take a wild guess at the answer?
You're still liable. If someone from your company signs an agreement, your company is still liable. You can certainly argue it. But I think at the end of the day, it's pretty easy to draw the lines to liability there.
Yeah. V had another good question somewhere in here. Oh, here it is. How does a shipper negotiate carrier vetting with a broker? Ooh. How does a broker offer security risk management to a shipper that deals with high value shipments without directly knowing their partners? Damn. All right. So V's already getting into the next section that we should probably talk about. Okay, hold on, V, because we have, I think that's our third or fourth section. We will hit on that question because that's probably one of the most important things. You saw Jeremy nodding his head at it. Okay. The next most important thing that us as a group decided that we wanted to talk about is that when shippers give us a contract and we're a broker, but the contract says we're a carrier and all this other jazz. So, Guy, in all your experience in all these years of working, is this still a trend where you get these contracts that say you're a carrier and the shipper's like, I don't give a crap what you are, sign it, guy?
We receive those, yes, all the time. Constantly. But many shippers now, most I'd say, have some kind of brokerage agreement.
That's good.
And
they didn't used
frankly,
to. Like,
we refuse, we can't do it. It's something, maybe in the wild Western days of yore, you'd look at the size of the opportunity and risk it for the biscuit. But you just, period, cannot do it. So it's difficult.
Jeremy, from a shipper's perspective, why y'all give us agreements that say we're carriers when we're brokers?
Yeah, I mean, so I think there's two pieces to it, right? I do agree with Guy that brokerage specific agreements seem to be much more common than they ever were. When I first started out, I mean, it's only been 10 years ago.
It was all carrier, right?
It was all carrier. And brokers would redline, they would do all sorts of things to try to denote that they weren't, primarily responsible, that they, they subcontracted out work, that sort of thing, right? And it was a lot of heavy lifting. But I'm an unusual shipper insofar as I don't try to force brokers to operate with a carrier agreement. We actually, for brokers, what we like to do is we have them send us their shipper broker agreement, and we'll work from that because we have a master services agreement for all of our vendors, whether it's transportation or uniforms or whatever, right? And a lot of that can be very, have a lot of terminology and terms within there that isn't specific to transportation. So we work through some of those, but then also bring in their specific agreement and work through those terms.
So Jason, what's your advice to people when they get that shipper carrier contract and you're a broker? For like general best practices, if you had a magic wand, what are you how are you gonna teach people, or what would your advice be to salespeople who get it?
So I think, first of all, it's a good opportunity to have that conversation with your shipper, your customer, and, try to explain, educate on what a broker is actually doing and why you can't sign an agreement as a carrier. That it's a perfect opportunity to actually discuss your risk as a broker, to explain why you can't accept that liability as a carrier. And if they simply don't have a brokerage agreement, as a broker, it's a good idea to have your own shipper broker agreement that you can offer in its place. Hey, you know, I know you don't have a brokerage agreement, but I have one. Will you look this over? You know, there's just.
Does anybody actually really sign those though? Like what happens when you give that to a shipper? What do they say?
They're signed occasionally, but at least you're having the dialogue. You're talking, you've got to
you're
talk
right. Have a dialogue.
to your customer. You've got to be transparent, and I think that it's you know, it'll be well received. You know, there are brokers out there that
is it though? Like, what if you're a salesperson, Jason? What if you're a salesperson and you're like, I kind of have been wishy-washy about whether I'm a broker or I'm a carrier. And then I don't want to have this conversation because I want the business.
Right. Then again, you haven't been as transparent than you probably should have been. Right. And, you know, it's going to come time to pay the piper when your compliance folks get a hold of that contract. So I don't know. I mean, you know, a broker should not sign a carrier agreement, bottom line. So if you
we didn't tell anybody why. Jason, could you tell us why? I forgot that part. Well,
you know, brokers aren't held to the same liabilities as a carrier would be, you know, in short.
Yeah.
And there's we'll go over a bunch of different ways where that's, you know, apparent, but at the, you know, the short version is carriers are carriers, brokers are brokers, carriers are liable for this, brokers are liable for that. And you don't want to intermix them too much.
Okay. Yeah. That's right. It's like one of the biggest no-nos, but I always tell people, like, sometimes you got to sign that shit. So, Guy, what's the down and the dirty? Not for you in your job right now, more like in the past or whatever you've seen in the industry. What is the down and dirty? Can you really have that kind of conversation with the shipper, or are you going to lose the business?
Well, so it's about misdirection, right? When Cassandra was very helpfully,
you guys, that's sarcasm. He fucking hated me when I worked with him. He hated me.
And we'd have sales reps coming in with opportunities, and part of the qualification stage is that contract. There are a large number of conversations you can have around, like, great, you know, the contract and legal, we're looking at it. While we're doing that, what are your lanes? Can we provide some pricing? Can we incent that customer or that shipper to work with us by providing utility to them that they don't really care anymore? Or they'll accept my TIA, you know, standard, very helpful shipper broker agreement that I supply, right?
Yep.
There's a lot you can do around those red lines. If it's a bloodbath, they won't be as hesitant to accept it. If, hey man, I'm really good at heavy haul and you have a lot of overdimensional or whatever it is, right? Whatever utility you can provide for that customer.
How did you feel when I first got to the company and I started restricting contracts? Are you still mad at me, Guy?
I have never been mad at you, for the record, ever.
Such a liar, you guys.
Never.
He hated me. Jeremy was my favorite. He was my favorite child.
I don't know why. I was always in trouble.
You were never in trouble. Guy was an amazing leader, and I think Guy hated me. I'm just gonna put that out right now. I sense tension in between us. Guy, are you drinking?
Absolutely not.
You're still working? Okay.
I should be, but sadly.
Okay, so wait, I haven't been paying attention to our questions, which I'll get to in just a minute because they're kind of flying in. But I want to go back to this, Jeremy. If you were a shipper of many companies, not your current company, what's your position on red lines? And first question is, do you really want to work with a broker, or do you really focus on carriers in your opinion, not as your company? And then also, what can we do with red lines? Like, what's been your response when people ask you if they can redline the contract?
Yeah, no, that's good. So, you know, my experience is that you need both carriers and brokers, right? I've yet to encounter a shipping operation that could function, you know, solely with one or the other, right? And by that I mean like a sophisticated truckload operation, right? And you know, my experience is that you should be accommodating as a shipper to be able to deal with both, right? And even with the companies that I've worked for, we've had some sort of mix, right? Whether it was 60-40, 70-30, broker to carrier, maybe some local stuff runs on carrier, but the long stuff runs, through a brokerage. So, we've had to accommodate a lot of that. With regard specifically to Redlines, I'm also, again, because I don't usually sign the contracts, I encourage, my providers to redline whatever they want to, and I will send it to legal. I will let legal decide what those red lines do from a risk tolerance perspective, or how it changes the nature of the agreement. So, but I will say I've seen red lines more often. I'm sorry. I've seen red lines more often accepted now than I ever did when I was earlier in my career.
Me too.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Jason, what are you seeing for red lines lately? What's been the discussion, or from a best practices standpoint? Do you ask the salespeople if you were working for, I don't know, best practices, folks? I don't want people to get cornered into talking about their companies, no matter how great they are. But what's your advice on like red lines, and is it worth asking for it, and how many can you make? And would red lines mean, that means you literally, hey, can we edit your contract, shipper? Because most of the time the contracts we receive for full truckload is a shipper's contract. And then we're like, oh man, this thing's brutal. Can we edit it? That's what red lines mean. So go ahead, Jason, I'm sorry.
I think when you're looking at redlining an agreement, you have to take back into consideration that your company's risk tolerance. So if there's things in that contract that you cannot accept as risk, then they need to be redlined. They need to be addressed with the customer. Maybe that means you negotiate to a lower insurance rate or a more favorable term to pay. But really, at the end of the day, anything that any risk that you can't accept as a broker, you need to redline. And then again, have that transparency with the customer, have that conversation on why it's redlined, and hopefully offer some sort of alternate.
Do you redline everything? Like, do you change jurisdiction? Do you change like typos? Do you kind of just go through everything and change everything, or are you kind of picking your battles?
I think as a general rule, you want to pick your battles. You could discourage a customer, I think, if you really marked up a contract with every single typo or missing comma or whatever. But yeah, for the most part, you're trying to hit the big button issues. For example, is 30 days to pay versus 45 days to pay? Is that a huge sticking point? You have to know if that's a risk for your company or not. And if it's a huge risk for your company, then you need to redline.
Do you guys care about days to pay? Like, Jeremy, if somebody in general, you guys, like in your mind, not your companies, but do you care about days to pay if you see that redlined as a shipper?
Yeah.
Or are you like, I'm holding on to my money? Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, we care. We care about days to pay. Especially on the shipper side. Now, I will say, like, I've worked for companies in distribution, right? So it's a cash flow industry, right? It's just like a brokerage in a lot of ways, right? So, having super aggressive pay terms, 15 days or something like that, that's a hard thing for us to swallow. We would prefer, standard net 30 is pretty good for most of us. But I've seen, when I was on the other side, I've had shippers ask for net 60 pay terms.
I've had them ask for more.
Yeah.
Like the bigger the company.
That's a hard thing to swallow.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you guys as a lawyer,
Yes,
the bigger the company, they do the same thing to me as a lawyer. They're like, oh, Cassandra, here's our agreement, and it says 90-day terms in there. And just as principle, I don't need the money, but just fucking principle. I'm like, no, you got to pay me earlier than that. You don't get to hold on to that money for 90 days. That's ridiculous. It's drives me up the wall. So let me ask you this, Jeremy, in your opinion, or Guy or Jason, with payment terms, are they different between the broker and the carrier? Like, if you're a shipper, are you kind of giving the carrier quicker payment terms? and the broker longer ones? And you don't have to speak as your company, just like what you've seen in the industry, maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the industry, you know, I've seen, you know, there's brokers that offer quick pay options. There's, you know, there's carriers that factor their loads. You know, but net 30, I think, is kind of across the board. Everyone wants to be paid in 30 days. That's
Okay.
what I've seen.
Yeah, we have some carrier relationships at both of the companies that I worked for that wanted very accelerated payment terms, and we do that. We offer that for some of our what we would call our incumbent carriers, and through our brokerage relationships, we accommodate that too. But the broker is almost always a net 30.
That's fair, but I've seen, Guy, what have you seen for payment terms in your career from shippers?
Shipper, like oil and gas is a classic example of someone who wants to get out to 60 or 90-day terms. And sometimes you have to deal with that. And sometimes, I mean, someone's paying that 2.75% interest on it, right? We have to adjust our rates to accommodate it, because those two nailed it. Carriers want to get paid immediately. And as a broker, carriers are my customers too.
That's when I bitch on Madtropolis about how brokers are banks, that's what I'm talking about, really, is because the brokers, I shouldn't say we, because I worked for carriers and currently I consult for shippers too, but I feel bad sometimes for brokers because they pay the carriers sometimes within sometimes within upon delivery, depending on the carrier, sometimes within 15 days. Or 30, I think 30 days is long for a carrier, but that may be my old time experience. And then you turn around, you got a shipper who's like 60, 90 days, who knows? The bigger the shipper, the longer the terms. So it's like we're the brokers are the banks. It's just interesting. That was a small vent. I'm sorry.
No, but you're right. I mean, that's one of the things as a shipper, we actually look at, you know, for instance, it's really important for us, our brokerage relationships, is we understand that our carriers are going to get paid very quick, and we make accommodations. But, you know, when I first started at the company that I'm at now, we had 250 separate vendors, and we were issuing, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of individual checks. And just by switching to a freight management partner, we were able to consolidate that down to like 100 checks to cut, 100 invoices to process. And so there was a lot of banking, but also paperwork efficiency that we gained out of that. So brokers do provide
that's smart.
A big value proposition on that piece, even if they don't understand that they're doing it.
Yeah, I think a lot of brokers don't understand it either. Hold on, we've got some amazing comments come through. You guys, I forgot, and I'm still trying to get better at this whole live shit. I'm just a dumb lawyer. Someone said to me that sometimes I don't speak to the podcasting group as well, which is audio only, like through all the podcast apps. So I try to be better at doing that, which is reading the comments. Andrew Teal had the most amazing comment because it piggybacked on my bitching session, which is, Cassandra, that's not even the inevitable fuel advance that gets asked about 20 minutes after pickup. So he's piggybacking off. Don't forget, Cassandra, that brokers do the fuel advance as well, so shippers don't have to do that. That's amazing. That's amazing insight. So we have questions going back from a while. And give me 1 second. I'm sorry, folks. Maybe I am sorry, folks. I saw something really good, a couple of them really good, but now it's like I'm losing everybody. All right, I'll skip past. Sorry if I missed your question. Put it back in and I'll see it. I promise I'll pay attention. I'm not doing so good. Okay, freight coach, who we love, Chris Jolly. 90 days that bleed into 120, we turn a blind eye, not to lose our freight. You're so right, Chris. Okay, sorry. I'll stop bitching about payment terms. That wasn't part of the, Dan's with us. Dan says 120 days is what he's seen. Oopsie, didn't mean to that one. Okay, we'll continue on our journey, which is we talked about red lines. Now we're going to talk about what I think is the most important provision. So a lot of people say to me, especially when they're smaller companies or mid-sized companies, they're like, Cassandra, I get these contracts from shippers, and you can be a carrier or broker in this situation and think of it the same way, which is I get this huge ass contract. What I can't afford a lawyer because lawyers are expensive. Despite how fast I can go through these contracts, we're still expensive. What do I focus on myself first? So, Guy, what is your advice to somebody like that? Since I'm sure you've had to have been your entire experience, I'm sure you've had to look at them without the help of a lawyer. Which were dark days, Guy. Very dark days without me.
Lost and lonely, adrift at sea, missing for days. Of course, the insurance requirements are quite important. Do those align? I mean, we use Reliance. Reliance is amazing.
I love Reliance.
Hey, shout out. Do ours align with what the shipper requires? And in nearly every case it does. Making sure. Our carrier qualification requirements. I mean, another shout out, we use RMIS, right? And I've used it in many places that just handles it and makes sure that safety scores and, the CSA scores, the days of business, everything, all the ducks are in a row. And then indemnification is the big one. We always skim straight to what do they want me to hold them harmless for, right? What kind of things do you want me to assume when I pick up this load or contract this load with a carrier?
What does that mean, indemnification? Because that's like a big word. Like sometimes nobody knows what the hell it means. If anybody wants to educate us.
I have a
question. Judging my chair? Sorry, hold on 1 minute. This is a nice, lovely chair. Look, it has a design and it has this. What's wrong with you people? I even got so self-conscious today. Look, I got so self-conscious today that I switched up the background and everything because I didn't want to be made fun of.
I do think that's your third chair in 3 weeks, though. It was a couch and
because
then a chair.
Trying to switch it up.
But Cassandra, I have a question for you. So going back to Guy and insurance, if I'm a broker and a carrier has insurance requirements that I don't meet, but I still agree to them, how much trouble am I going to get into?
This is what I'm calling a leading question.
Doesn't have insurance requirements?
No. Me as the broker agreeing to a shipper's contract, they require me as a broker to have blank insurance. I don't meet
those. Let's say $250,000 in cargo.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I have 100.
So is that what you're saying, Jason? Like the carriers you hire, broker must have $250,000 in insurance.
Right.
And then me as a broker, I sign that, right, Jason?
Right. But then
what does Jeremy think is going to happen?
Let me back up here. So the agreement says $250,000. I have 100,000 in contingent cargo, let's say, and my carriers only have 100,000 in primary.
So I'm trying to pay attention, but the chair is getting beat up. This is not a grandma chair. It's not. Sorry, Jason. Go ahead.
Well, there's a gap. There's a gap. Okay. Who's left holding that gap at the end of the day? The broker is. If you agree to terms that you do not have, access to or you don't have coverage for, you will be held to those terms. That's the point I'm trying to make, and it's important.
You all know that Jason is good for depositions. Like if a plaintiff attorney has to depose someone for a lawsuit, they don't want to depose Jason because he led me down the path of a leading question. He already knew the answer to it. And then you kind of had like a little grin when you led me down there, but I see it all the time where people, they agree that they'll hire carriers for $250,000 in insurance. And we all know most carriers don't have $250,000 in insurance.
Right.
So then who has to pay for the cargo claim when it's $250,000 and the carrier only had $100,000? That's a big miss. So how do you negotiate that with the shipper, Guy?
Redlines.
Do you negotiate
it? You don't have the proper contingent or an umbrella policy to cover everything. Sometimes it's auto. There's all kinds of weird. You have to just very carefully. That's why, as Jeremy said, it's down here. Jeremy, as Jeremy said, the right person has to sign the contract. You can't have some sales yahoo just John Hancocking willy nilly.
Mm-hmm.
So wait, Guy still is dodging around it. So if I'm the shipper guy, or Jeremy's a shipper, and Jeremy's like, but I want $250,000 in cargo insurance. I want you to have
call Reliance and say, how much do I need to pay to up it? Or I don't, or I redline it, or I don't sign that contract. It's really pretty cut and dry. It's just like the carrier thing.
Yeah. Sometimes I miss the other guy, the one from like 15 years ago who would have been like, fuck it. Just sign it.
Well, I've been deposed since then.
I made that up. You I don't know if you really were like that.
You ever want to feel clever, then sit in a room like that. It's over.
Yeah. I think that's what happens with age is we all get bit by stuff and then we turn cynical. So, okay. So Jeremy, in all your years of experience, do you have any insight on how to negotiate either from a broker perspective or a shipper perspective on how, is there anything Guy's missing? Can you educate Guy?
Yes, please.
Or is he right on that corner?
Never. No, I think, Jason said something earlier that I think that was really important. And actually I've seen it in the comments. Ron Kane, I think also sort of mentioned it. And that is that, contracts can get really nitty gritty. They can get really detail oriented. You can kind of get stuck in the morass, but you really, really, really have to have those conversations to understand, like to get that, to coin a legal phrase right here, to get the meeting of the minds, right? Like, hey, what does this mean when your contract says X? What exactly does that mean I'm signing up for? And if there's clarity between the parties on what those things mean, then again, it can grease the wheel to get the agreement actually signed, right? And as long as everyone understands that they're on the same page, but yeah, I mean, our contracts have, they can be pretty restrictive in terms of what they require. But we've made adjustments on our side, based on, again, to what Guy said, how badly do we need this vendor, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Someone said something. We have a lot of questions rolling in. Damn it, I again haven't been paying attention. I'm a shitty host. Okay, hold on. You know what happened is I was paying attention to everybody had questions, but then the comments about the chair came in and it distracted me because I actually thought it was a trendy chair what I picked. Apparently not. And Andrew Teal, we're going to have some words lately. So I like this question, this point. It's a point by Ben Ward. I like this. He says some shippers just push through the required new vendor setup packet without truly understanding what they're asking for. Shipper contracts are not one size fit all. I agree. There have been lots of times where I've gone through the contract and I know Guy is going to say the same thing, and Jason and Jeremy, where it's, you guys are asking for this in your contract, but I don't think you really want this. I don't even think you know what this means. Which I think is interesting when they do that. For example, Peter.
But that's like the point Jeremy just made.
Somebody. Go ahead. Sorry.
The point Jeremy just made was spot on. If there's something strange or something that I see that's peculiar in an agreement, that's the perfect opportunity to get with your customer and say, hey, what do you guys want to get done here? Because if you don't understand it and they don't understand it, maybe it doesn't need to be in the agreement at all.
Or what happened? Usually that's in the contract because something catastrophic occurred, and yeah.
That's a fabulous, fantastic point as well. Yep.
What do you ever ask the shipper what happened, or you guys just leave it alone?
I mean, you can ask, you can ask whatever you want, but I know exactly what you mean. I'm trying to think of a good example of something in a contract that would make me think of the question, what happened?
I saw one, but this is really intense, y'all. This is super intense. The big, huge retailer had said that the broker will indemnify and defend, which means if the shipper gets sued for anything, including accidents at the carrier cost, that the broker has to pay for their legal defense and anything the jury awards. It's expensive shit. And they said, even if we do something wrong, we still want you to pay for it.
Right.
Right.
And
So
I was like,
the indemnity
I don't think you
includes
want this.
their own, right. So the indemnity included their own
And of course,
negligence.
naturally, because Cassandra's an asshole, I was like, this is an asshole term. Like, you telling me that, I think Guy had maybe, somebody said this as one time, which was you telling me that if you guys drop a pallet on a driver's foot and it's your fault, driver sues you guys, we got to step in and indemnify and defend.
I'm saying that more, the word, the sole, or the sole responsibility. So it's all on whoever signed that agreement. If anything happens and the driver is, in the porta potty, it's our fault. And that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
I think so too. To go back to some of these points,
I see you.
so somebody said,
I caught that.
somebody,
I caught that.
what, yeah, Matthew Kane just said it. Insurance companies would never agree to those terms. Matthew, you are right. That is not covered by insurance. Guy, are there any terms that pop up that are not covered by insurance we need to remember and bring up to our shippers?
Man,
do you check with Reliance? Do you just send the contract to Reliance and then they can do that if you wanted to? Not your company, but if you wanted to.
If it's out of the ordinary, a lot of these contracts are getting to be pretty similar. So you look for the word like the sole responsibility. Yeah. You look for draconian insurance requirements. You look for stuff that's just not normal, right? If you see enough of them, there's pretty simple language in most of them. As long as it lists me as a broker, as long as the insurance requirements are in line, as long as the indemnification identifies that shipper's a shipper, broker's the broker, carrier's the carrier, and a contractor, then we're usually okay.
Right.
Cassandra, you make a great point though. If you have questions like that involving a contract, get with your insurance provider, get with the underwriters, have them look at it. Most of them will do that because at the end of the day, they're the ones that are going to be partially on the hook at least for anything you agree to. So they're usually more than welcome to take a look at those things and give you some advice as a customer of theirs. So keep that in mind.
I agree. That was actually I hope you guys listened to Jason. That was a really good tip. We're going to get to Tyler's question in just a minute. I want to hit Ron's question real quick, which is, the problem is, because Ron, you guys don't know, but Ron Kane negotiates his contracts. And he is a beast with contracts and a pain in my ass. Just want to say that out loud. So problem is most contracts that the disagreement makes no sense to the ground folks, which he's right. Lawyer to lawyer, it can really slow things down. Which is also right. Like, Guy, how are you talking to your team about indemnification? Do they even know what the heck you're talking about when you're talking about indemnification, or are you the magical leader?
I mean, again, if they're a salesperson and they keep running into this wall, they're going to find clever ways around it by, again, like Jeremy and so many have said, proving the service. Or they're going to be held up in legal and not close any business. And it'll all be Cassandra's fault. Cassandra's fault. How dare she?
It's always Cassandra's fault. But that's okay. That's what lawyers are for. But Ron's right. Like, once it gets to the lawyer and lawyer situation, you're like, fuck. This isn't going to go anywhere. And, all right, Guy. Go ahead, Jeremy.
I was just going to say to piggyback on Guy, what he was saying for a second about people having to learn. My first job in logistics, anytime we got a contract, I had to walk it down to the president's office and stand there while he read it and watch him pull out his red pen and then make all of his notes all over it and then dress me down for bringing him such a BS contract.
I like that guy.
So I learned really
and you're
quick
like, I don't know
what's not going to be there. Yeah, I'm not a lawyer. What do I know? Yeah.
Wait, but Jeremy, did you start paying attention and then read it and?
Yeah.
And then
yeah.
Guy, this is why he was my favorite.
Oh yeah, Jeremy's such a fast learner. He's passed us all by.
He passed me by. Like when I was at Echo, he might as well have been the fucking attorney.
He already
People would have
started
liked
ahead
him
of me,
better.
so it was a piece of cake. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so the next person says, which was that one question I wanted to go back to. Who was it? Tyler? I think Tyler, who had a really great question. Okay, just so everybody knows who's basic to this. The indemnity provision is the most important thing, I think, and insurance is right next to it. Jason, okay, just checking, because Jason might have said no, and then I was like, oh shit. Tyler says, how do you navigate around the indemnity clauses? Guy, Jeremy, Jason, what do you guys do? You read it, and let's say it says that broker is going to pay for, indemnify, and defend for everything that is done by the carrier. Carrier gets in an accident, then the Walmart is right on the trailer, so the plaintiff attorney knows to sue Walmart, and then Walmart sues the shipper. Sorry, the plaintiff attorney sues Walmart. I guess I'm fucking drinking on these shows. I can't even talk anymore. And then the brokers has to pay for the legal bill. So, anybody have any negotiation tips?
I don't think I can offer any negotiation tips, but I can just again reiterate that if you can't accept the risk, do not agree to it. You gotta. There's circumstances where you gotta weigh that risk versus reward. If you can tolerate the risk versus the reward, then that's a decision you'd have to make internally. But yeah, it can be touchy. Certainly can be touchy.
Guy.
Yeah, I think
go ahead, Jeremy.
I was just going to say, insurance, like the insurance amounts are something that can always be negotiated, right? Those are always a negotiated question, right? If somebody wants more than the standard 100,000. But indemnity, that's a philosophical thing, right? Like the shipper is trying to do something very specific with that. And that's typically a lot harder to negotiate.
Look at Guy.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is what is happening. They have been stung or bit in the past.
Yeah.
And they're hoping that somebody just signs off on it. It can be a conversation, an education, like, hey, everything, I'm sending it back with a few red lines. Everything else looks hunky-dory, except for this bit on indemnity. I mean, legally, my insurance will drop me if I sign this document. Yeah. Now, if you were talking to Target or somebody big, they might not care, but most shippers will listen.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna go off track for just 1 second because Andrew Teal just asked a really good question that I think we need to talk about. All right, this is the time for Guy to throw me under the fucking bus. This is so important. Andrew Teal says, "What's a reasonable expert?" You guys keep noting that I'm poking at Guy because here's the thing: Guy right now is being very professional and polite to me. When we're offline, he's very mean to me. I just want you guys to know that. Lawyer jokes, everything. I have dozens of witnesses. Damn it. I got to find some other witnesses besides your friends. Okay. So Andrew Teal says, what's a reasonable expectation for contract review and return time-wise, which is so important. Okay. This is what happened. One time I worked for a company. Many times I worked for a company. And I was in charge of the contract review. And the contracts, I came in, the contracts were being done in an amateur way. And they needed to be done better. And then it took a long time for them to get done properly. And I had to learn. And then it became a shit show. And I became a bottleneck. And contracts were taking like a very long time to get returned. So what, so anybody have any tips on that portion? Or what do you guys expect? Like,
Jeremy nailed it. Don't waste legal time. I mean, it's the, I'd say above, indemnity insurance requirements. Above that is, does it say we're a carrier? Stop. Just don't waste legal's time with garbage, right? Learn. I mean, all of our salespeople and salespeople in the past, like Jeremy, I mean, everyone knows you don't move forward unless it's extremely important. We almost, and I know at a company that the three of us worked for in the past that we're dodging saying, which is probably wise, we had a qualification document that accompanied everything that went to legal, right? So what's the scope of the opportunity? Is it,
are you talking about my questionnaire?
Yes.
Like are you talking about the questionnaire? You
I
actually like
remember
that?
that
I thought you
questionnaire.
hated
Yeah.
me for that.
Oh.
I did one thing right. The questionnaire was like the first thing was, is it a shipper broker contract or is it a shipper carrier contract? If shipper carrier contract, go back and ask your shipper, can you get a broker contract? If they say no, the next step is, can you ask for red lines? If they say no to that, then you go to your leader.
Yeah.
But Guy, what did that take us? Like 6 months to come up with that questionnaire of pain?
Well, because you were being inundated by 600 different sales reps is,
It was
half-assed
chaotic.
attempt at getting you something. Correct. Darth Cassandra.
Darth. And he's back. Do you have liquor in that golden? No, you guys, look at him smile. He's back. I finally got him. How long did it take me? 55 minutes. All right. What else do you have to say about Guy? What else do you have to say about contracts that you could wrap us up with in 5 minutes? Because for those of you who are curious, I think we should do another episode on the co-brokering agreement and the carrier agreements and NDAs and any other shit show that we get involved with. What other tips do you have as a leader, Guy, for those? Because most of those people who are watching this, they either have a legal team that they hate sending contracts to, or they're not quite there yet, and they're like in charge of reviewing the contracts. Do you have any high-level tips?
Just like anyone who enters into any kind of relationship with me, look for all the red flags ahead of time. Jason nailed it. Look at the scope of the opportunity. Are you going to get me, $10 million in business at 15% margins? Is it worth, $1.5 million in gross profit to take a look at and maybe swallow our pride a little bit? Or is it, at what point in the negotiation process are we? Is this my very first call to Cabela's and they send me a gatekeeping contract that's ridiculous?
Yep.
Or are we at the, we've flown out there a few times and played golf and gone to Vegas with Cassandra, and now it's time to buy the trucks or whatever, right? And where are we? So it's such a fluid thing. Great.
I love that. Okay, first of all, Guy brought up a good thing I forgot to bring up, which is lean staffing next Friday. I want everyone who's listening right now, next Friday, I'm going to be in person with, you guys' favorite person, which is Doug Wagner, CEO of Echo. He's probably watching right now, rolling his eyes at all of us.
Doug.
Probably cursing us out and giving us the finger. Hi, Doug. We love you. Okay. We didn't share all that much though, so glad she's not there anymore. Okay, so then, and I had to say it. Who else gonna say it? So Doug's me with us. Kevin Nolan. Jeremy, don't give me that look, Jeremy.
I didn't.
Kevin Nolan's gonna be with us. Justin Hall's gonna be with us. Oh, Trent from Truck Stop's gonna be with us, but we're gonna be in person like real humans. And Lean is going to do this whole event. So I'll see you guys in a different setting. I think we're gonna be like in a casino-like setting. And maybe if Guy or Jeremy or Jason get some energy, they'll come to Vegas too.
I love Lean Solutions. Amazing people.
Yeah, they are good people. Okay, Jason, you're the next one to tell us the key takeaways. Yeah, Charlie. The key takeaways. What do you want us to remember from a high level with these ridiculous contracts?
Just parting words or parting thoughts is know your risk. If someone's asking you to agree to something outside of your risk tolerance, make sure you think about it. Make sure you're covered. That's really
Jason, how many companies really know their risk tolerance? What if you don't know what the hell your risk tolerance is?
I don't know. I guess I couldn't speculate, but I think that it's something that you work with your counsel on, and you work with your insurance providers on, and your board of directors. Yeah. But it's something you need to know. And then again, when going over these contracts with a customer, full transparency. Honesty is the best policy. So
Good point. And that you just smoothly rolled it. That's how I would answer that too. You smoothly rolled into Jeremy, obviously my favorite child. Jeremy, what do you got for us?
Yeah, I think the most important thing would be to really understand what each other's needs are, right? For instance, if your shipper is asking for something really unreasonable, try to understand why, right? Like, what is it they're trying to actually achieve? And a lot of times there's a way to figure out a way around it, right? Like if there's a real sticking point in the legal language, being able to understand what they're trying to protect themselves from can potentially open up new opportunities to find a different path towards an agreement on that.
I think it's really important to remember that what Jason said about risk tolerance, if you don't know what the hell that even means, talk to your insurance broker if you can't afford a lawyer, because they'll tell you there's usually 4 things. And Guy said it many times. Everybody on here said it many times, which is usually the insurance provision, the indemnification provision, cargo claims, who pays for them. And I'm missing one other that it's because I'm fucking half in the bag, so I can't remember anymore. But there are usual 4 things that your insurance company will tell you to watch out for that you can figure out what to do. I will see you guys live from Vegas next Friday. I'm so excited. And by the way, next Friday we are going to with the leaders. Oh, Guy and Jeremy are going to love this. With the CEOs and the CC whatevers we have with us, they're a pretty big deal, right? So I didn't want to do like a stupid session with them that everybody else has done. So I did a unique session, which is called The Stupid Shit I've Done. And I'm going to get them liquored up before the show. I'm probably going to get most of them in trouble. We'll see. And then I want them to tell us stories about the stupid shit they've done earlier on in their career, because I've done tons of stupid shit and I can share lots of it. But like, I think that from a business perspective, despite my unprofessional articulation of the show, I think that we can learn from other people's mistakes. So, I don't know. It'd be nice to hear a different perspective from these folks who've made it. They've made it. They got their titles. They get all sorts of money, and we get to hear what they did wrong. So, Guy, Jason, Jeremy, I hope you guys come back. And I hope it takes sooner than 55 minutes to get Guy to start throwing darts at me and shots at me across the bow. Somebody get him drunk before the next episode is all I have to say. Have a great weekend. Thank you. Somebody get him drunk. Seriously. Jeremy, that's your job. Thank you guys. This was an amazing episode. I'll see you next time.
Thanks,
and
Cassandra.
Thank you, Metropolis. Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.